Hello again, the gays. Welcome to me garden party fantasy. Straight people, you of course welcome to tag along too, provided you emotionally damaged. Hi, how are you? Cringe, let's talk about it. The word cringe has taken over me vocabulary lately. It just pops into my head all the time. Like when I randomly remember that month back in 2013 when all of my Facebook posts were just lyrics to songs rewritten in iambic pentameter. Why? What audience was that for? Who is this inconceivable person I used to be? Cringe, mega cringe. I think I say this word like 50 times a day. Cringe, cringe, cringe. And I'm not the only one. Google Trends shows that in the US, search interest in the word cringe has dramatically increased over the last decade, peaking in 2016 and remaining pretty constant ever since. And if you look at worldwide trends, search interest in cringe is at an all-time high the month I'm making this video. So what is cringe? Well, let's start with some examples. There was a recent thread on Ask Reddit titled, "What Things Really Make You Cringe?" And here's some of the most voted responses. The time I was talking too loud at a wedding when I was too supposed to, and everyone at the wedding turned around to see what I shall would to shut up. Recordings of my own voice. When I remember that I do have a boyfriend, he just goes to another school thing. Early teen. So many cringe stuff I did. I hope all me old friends have forgotten about me. This happened about 2 years ago. I ordered some pizza hot online, and when it was delivered, the lady handed me the pizza boxes. I said, "Thanks," and she told me shirt was inside out. I said, "Oh," and then she hands me the receipt to sign and leave a tip, and I spend 30 seconds trying to get the pen to work. She looks at the pen and says, "You have to click the pen." I said, "Oh," and then she reaches to get the receipt and tells me the pizza smells good. Then I said, "You too," and then I closed the door and killed myself. All of these responses illustrate exactly what writer Melissa Dahl says in her book, Cringeworthy: A Theory of Awkwardness. According to Dahl, the moments that make us cringe are when we re-yanked out of our own perspective and we can suddenly see ourselves from somebody else's point of view. She quotes the anthropologist Edmund Carpenter, who in the 60s did a study of the Biam tribe in New Guinea, where he showed them mirror video and photographic images of themselves for the first time and described the results. They were paralyzed. After their first startled response, covering their mouths and ducking their heads, they stood transfixed, staring at their images, only their stomach muscles betraying great tension. So basically, they cringed at themselves. Maybe self-awareness always begins with cringing. Like, pretty much everyone seems to hate the sound of their voice when they hear a recording for the first time. I guess because it sounds different from the way you hear it resonating in your head. So when you hear the recording, you realize, oh God, that's how other people hear me all the time. And you suddenly aware of this clash between the way you appear to yourself and the way you appear to other people. That's when you cringe, the feeling Dahl describes as the intense visceral reaction produced by an awkward moment, an unpleasant kind of self-recognition, where you suddenly see yourself through someone else's eyes. It's a forced moment of self-awareness, and it usually makes you cognizant of the disappointing fact that you aren't measuring up to your own self-concept. When you talking too loud at a wedding and suddenly everyone turns around to see what a shoal wouldn't shut up, you suddenly realize how you look to them, because we've all at some point turned around to see what a shoal wouldn't to shut up. But this time, you the ashole cringe. Often it's the violation of an implicit social norm that makes us cringe. There's no law of state or even of etiquette that tells you exactly how loud you are supposed to speak at a wedding. It's something you have to intuit based on context. How loud are other people speaking? Is the ceremony about to begin and we all supposed to be quiet now? According to YouTuber of Sauce, Michael here, the function of awkwardness is that it sends social dynamics by smoothing out what even etiquette doesn't rule on. Cringe is the electric shock, the emotional punishment for being awkward. It enforces the limits of socially acceptable behavior by wounding the ego. And memories of your cringy moments are often just as painful as the moments themselves. 10 years later, you will be trying to fall asleep, and for no reason at all, your brain will decide to remind you of that time you were talking too loud at the wedding and of the stupid thing you were saying when everyone turned around to stare at you and you all cringe all over again. That's why remembering your teenage years is so painful, because you look back and you realize, damn, I was the asshole for like 7 consecutive years. Can I just hire a hitman to kill everyone who remembers me before I don't know November? Now, all the examples we've considered so far involve self-cringe, but usually when we talk about cringe on the internet, we're talking about cringing at other people. Popular subreddits like r/cringe, cringepics, and Cringeutopia host videos and images of people behaving in cringy ways. For instance, a maternity photo that looks like a hostage crisis, grim moments of lamentation and cuckoldry, and Mitt Romney attempting to communicate during his first encounter with black people. Who let the dogs out? Who? Oh, watching that makes me feel like me soul is on fire. It makes me want to crawl out of my body and escape into another dimension. I think some people feel cringe more intensely than others. For me, it's uncomfortable to the point where I will reflexively pause a video like that because I just can't stand it. In other words, it's like watching me own YouTube videos, which, sweetie, if you put that shit on, I will leave the room. So why is it that cringing at other people hurts in the same way as cringing at yourself? Well, one theory is that cringing at other people is simply vicarious embarrassment or secondhand embarrassment. One is that cringing or it is second aliens embarrass Basically, it's a form of empathy. When you cringe at someone, you re-feeling the embarrassment that they re-feeling, just as if you watched someone fall down the stairs, you might wince empathetically with their pain. So, that's a veil. and sol yo 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 and the yo 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 you all will you you tell this But there's a problem with the vicarious embarrassment theory of cringe, or at least a complication, which is that in the purest examples of cringe, the person doing the cringy thing isn't feeling embarrassed. In fact, often they re super confident, and it's actually their lack of self-awareness about their embarrassing behavior that makes you cringe. Like when a woman posts a ridiculously over-face-tuned picture of herself as if anyone's gonna believe she looks like that, or when a man thinks he looks like a badass tokai when he actually looks like an embarrassing dingus. So in the internet sense of the word, cringe is not just vicarious embarrassment. Cringe and son in this. The dance on it. And bad has a very huge so whoa. Someone tripping and falling on stage is embarrassing, and I do feel embarrassed for her, but she knows it's embarrassing, and she feels embarrassed. You guys are just standing up because you feel bad that I fell, and that's really embarrassing, but thank you. Nothing about this is cringe. Maybe to her, it's self-cringe. Maybe she looks back on it, and it's still embarrassing, but I don't cringe at her. Maybe there's a difference between cringing at someone and cringing with them. When someone falls on stage, I cringe with her in the sense that I feel vicarious embarrassment. I cringe with her in the side some way and as say as my feelings mirror what she's feeling. But when I am cringing at someone, I am feeling something very different to what they re-feeling. I am cringing at Captain Betas over here because he does have the decency to cringe at himself. Another example is bad American Idol auditions, which are a quintessential cringe content. People try out for American Idol because they think they re good enough singers to compete in a national competition, so they re effectively revealing their own delusions when they show up and sing like this. Is this the real life or is this just fantasy? It's not just that he's terrible that makes it cringe. Most of us are bad singers, right? When people sing happy birthday at a party, usually they re-singing in 3 different keys at no particular tempo. But that's not cringe because the point of singing happy birthday is not to sound amazing. Bad American Idol auditions are cringe because of the contestants' misplaced confidence. Who are you as good as, in your opinion? The lead singer from Queen. It's the hubris of thinking you sound like Freddie Mercury when in fact you sound like a wounded street dog. Frozen. See, I admit that watching Red, I'm actually not in very much pain when I'm cringing at him. I laugh at his ludicrous performance, just like the judges do. And because he's so cocky, and because he doesn't to show signs of embarrassment himself, there's a part of me that actually kind of enjoys his failure. There's almost a sense of karma, a sense that because of his tragic hubris, he deserves the humiliation he's bringing upon himself. And me sense that he deserves it suppresses me compassionate response and helps remove any guilt I might otherwise have about taking pleasure in someone's humiliation. Contrast this with another idol cringe contestant, Misha, who's there with her mom, and they both seem like such sweethearts. I do believe in her talent very much. And she's delusional about her singing talent, but I'm rooting for her. And when she embarrasses herself, I feel no joy, only deep and agonizing cringe. Don't you wish your girlfriend was hot like me yikes? My differing reactions to Red and Misha track a distinction that Doll makes between compassionate cringe and contemptuous cringe. Compassionate cringe involves an emotional identification with the person you re-cringing at. Even if they aren't embarrassed themselves in the cringeworthy moment, you still feel the embarrassment they would feel, or perhaps ought to feel, if they were aware of how other people were perceiving them. Contemptuous cringe, on the other hand, involves an emotional distancing from the person you re-cringing at. Just like with compassionate cringe, you perceive that the person is embarrassing themselves, but instead of feeling embarrassment on their behalf, you feel annoyance and disgust at them, and maybe even a little schadenfreude. So these are actually two very different emotional responses. Vicarious embarrassment versus contempt. We call both feelings cringe, not because they re-similar feelings, but because they re-responses to the same type of situation, people lacking self-awareness embarrassing themselves without realizing it. Now embarrassment and contempt seem, at face value, like pretty unpleasant feelings. So why are we so fascinated by contempt that makes us feel this way? Why do these cringe subreddits have more than 1 million members? Why are cringe compilations and cringe reaction videos so popular on YouTube? Why does so much comedy feature cringy situations? Well, I think the answer to that question depends on whether we re-cringing compassionately or contemptuously. When I read that Ask Reddit thread where all the people share their cringe stories, I cringe compassionately. That is, I feel vicarious embarrassment for them. And with that compassion comes a sense of solidarity and camaraderie with them. I recognize myself in them, and I am reassured to hear that other people are just as awkward and embarrassing as I am. I am not the only one who cringes at me past or at videos of myself. I'm not the only one who sometimes says, you too, when the person says the pizza smells good. When we collectively laugh at these situations, we re-bonding over our shared human frailty. We re-recognizing that we all say the wrong thing sometimes, that we all arrogantly argue for an opinion only to later educate ourselves and realize how ignorant and wrong we were, that we all tried to present ourselves as cool and likable, as beautiful and talented and badass, only to totally miss the mark and completely embarrass ourselves. And laughing at our shared absurdity, our insecurity, our ridiculous pretenses, it makes us feel less alone. Now this is all, of course, assuming that we re-cringing compassionately. But I would argue that most cringe content on the internet does not encourage compassion. And that's kind of an uncomfortable fact because we like to think of ourselves as morally evolved. This is the 21st century, right? Pillories and freak shows and public floggings, these are barbaric practices from the Dark Ages, right? Surely no one on the internet would ever entertain themselves by humiliating people. Right. We would be a Zion, Bayon, We've got maniacs. We've got wackadoos. We've got schizos, fatties, and spurgs. Come see sexual deviance on display. That's right, folks. We've got cackling perverts of every denomination. Come see the panty sniffer. He'll stop at nothing to indulge his twisted cravings. Come see the skeleton girl. She hasn't had a bite in 30 days. That's right, we've got real live lesbians. And I'll be your master of ceremonies. Half man, half woman, all freak. Okay, we've heard enough heartwarming gibberish. Welcome to the dark side of cringe. Here on YouTube come, we have a cringe culture. And by that I mean we whole channels making content that centers the experience of cringing. We I, 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 and there's a huge audience that seeks out cringe content, including content the creator didn't intend to be cringe. I first started paying attention to this back in 2016, which was the heyday of the feminist cringe compilation, or still cringe compilation. Remember those? This is ancient history by YouTube standards, but in 2016, the word cringe was most associated with a YouTuber called Leafishir. His videos followed the format of a cringe reaction video, which means he would play someone else's content, then pause it to rant and voice over about how cringe it is. No makeup with some sweatpants. Oh me God, it's so fucking bad. He looks like he's cinder fluid. He looks like a fucking lesbian. This format of cringe reaction videos was very influential, and it was picked up by a rational herd of skeptical beasts and free-thinking tuxtos. What even is this thing? It must be one of the 76 genders. I didn't realize retarded was a gender. Sorry, my dudes, you err on the cringe side of history. Obviously, there was a political angle to cringe videos. The logical antelope is inviting you to foster a shared sense of humanity by recognizing your own weakness and the embarrassment of screeching feminists. No, this is an invitation to contempt. Here's a YouTube video titled Fat Acceptance Cringe Compilation. You'd expect from the title that it would be a video of fat acceptance activists behaving in cringy ways, but it isn't. It's literally just a compilation of fat people doing things. This is just a clip of a fat woman swimming. Is this cringe? Cringe. What is cringe about it? Earlier we defined cringe as either vicarious embarrassment or contempt for someone who lacks awareness about the way others are perceiving them. But in this video of a swimming fat woman, there's no context, so we don't know anything about her mental state. And we certainly don't know whether she's self-aware about how she's being perceived. If there is an interview where she talks about how she looks like a supermodel, or if she tried to Photoshop herself to look like a size 4, okay, maybe that would be cringe. But that's not what's going on in this clip. She's just existing in water. What cringe are we being invited to feel over this? Presumably something along the lines of, "You fat people, gross." It's literally just disgust, right? Disgust and contempt for a type of person, a type of body. Here's another cringe compilation. This Untitled Gender Fluid Non-Binary Cringe. And we rewatching a young teenager discuss their plans to start vlogging about their gender fluid identity. Honestly, it's kind of terrifying because gender fluid people just aren't accepted. Yeah, apparently not. And judging from the fact that I'm currently watching this in a cringe compilation, it seems that the person in this video was dead on about how people would perceive them. But despite that self-awareness, we re being invited to cringe because a goose being gender fluid like being fat is cringe in and of itself. Now the pedant in me wants to oppose this use of cringe. This is not real cringe, I wanna say. Cringe has to involve a clash between self-perception and perception by others. But this usage of cringe as a mere synonym for contempt is so widespread that there's really no point in objecting to it. If you look at the banner homage of Cringetopia, one of the sleazier cringe subreddits, you can pick out an otaku with a waifu body pillow, a furry, a couple bronies, a fedora tipper. You cute. Ah, of a video, other, These are subcultures associated with nerdy social outcasts. They read types of people who are widely ridiculed online. I'd like to share with you a list that I put together of groups that are often considered to be cringe. Bronies, furries, otaku, weebs, insoles, neckbeards, fedora tippers, gamers, TikTok teens, not like other girls, fanfic writers, beat poets, skulls, feminists, mag-ass trans people, non-binary people, transgenders, queer ukulele players, autistic people, fat people, the mentally ill, and the mentally disabled. Now I'm searching for some thread that all these groups have in common, and a handful of themes do jump out. Deviancy, whether physical, mental, social, or sexual. A combination of passionate sincerity and amateurism. The perceived tendency to lack emotional composure. Obsessive interest in unconventional hobbies. Low social status. It's pretty easy to wind up in the cringe category these days. If you add up all the groups on this list, I bet it includes most of the people watching this video. It includes me 3 or 4 times. I'm of course a fedora tipping, queer, ukulele playing TikTok teen. Can't we just accept that we all a bit cringe and try to be like compassionate or whatever? Fuck no. The internet will not abide any of that kumbaya bullshit. Oh no, this is social reject battle royale. Clearly, contemptuous cringing is rewarding to people in some way, and I want to explore what the rewards might be. Let's start by looking at the role of cringe in internet politics, where manufacturing contempt is a powerful strategy. At the height of YouTube anti-feminism, 2016 or so, you couldn't escape clips of this woman known as Big Red, a Toronto resident who showed up at a men's rights event and read off a list of feminist theses while swearing profusely. It's part of patriarchy, part of patriarchy. I don't know if you re-noticing a theme, patriarchy. I am reading fuckface. Mr. Entitled, Mr. Ego, patriarchy, fuckface. She's one of these people who generates memeable phrases at an amazing rate. I actually think she's hilarious and iconic, but I have unconventional tastes, Anastasia. Anyway, this video appeared in countless cringe compilations, reaction videos, remixes, and even anti-feminist video essays. Often Big Red was framed as like the feminist, the mascot of feminism, a sort of metonymic stand-in for all feminists, which is highly dishonest considering she's not even a high-profile activist or thinker. She was literally some random woman on the streets of Toronto. But because of this amusing 12-minute video, it was insisted upon that we all take a stand on this random woman who, we were told, exemplified feminism in its purest form. I call this strategy mascotization, the construction of a strawman nemesis. What you do is you select a cringe-worthy person and you appoint them the mascot of an opposing political team. It's very simple, but very effective. And it's best paired with memification. That's when you take a single moment in a person's life, you freeze it, and you declare that that moment fully represents a person. Then, through mascotization, you declare that this memified person represents an entire group or movement. You just so the group by or Other right-wing memes from this array include this protester, "You re-fucking a white male," memified as AIDS Skrillex, and this protester, "Can't you hate me? I'm a killer. Can't you hate me? I'm a killer," who was memified as Drigglypuff. The two of them symbolize the wretchedness of new male cuckoldry and the hysteria of social justice crybabies, respectively. I guess the ultimate memified mascot was Anita Sarkeesian, about whom hundreds of hours of salty gamer ramblings have been uploaded. Sometimes Anita was caricatured as cringe, as like this fake gamer girl, this pleb tier casual, throwing a pathetic tantrum at real gamers. But other times it was almost a super villainous caricature. This sort of dark, devouring mother archetype, threatening to confiscate your video games and engulf you in her abyss. Now, it's obvious why caricaturing your political enemies as supervillainous is effective, though it comes at the risk of backfiring by making your opponent seem a little bit too powerful, a little too beta. But the subtler strategy of symbolizing your political enemies not with an evil, but with a cringe-worthy mascot works because it connects with a wide audience in an intense, emotional way. Most people have a primal terror of becoming the target of public ridicule. And if someone has been made a laughingstock, it's much safer to take the side of the people doing the laughing than it is to risk being laughed at yourself. To be cringe is not to be in on the joke. And because people crave acceptance and dread rejection. I think one reason we're so fascinated by cringe content is that our brains want us to learn how to avoid being laughed at. When we see a mob of people, whether in person or online, laughing at someone and ridiculing them, we register an emotional memory of it as a warning. Don't act like that, or people will laugh at you. This is a powerful tool for anyone who wants to control human behavior. It's why public humiliation has, in many societies, been a punishment for criminals. You see a person in the stocks, in the pillory, at the whipping post, you see the mob jeering and throwing rotten vegetables, and it sends a powerful message. Don't do whatever that guy did. I don't think the internet has yet reached self-consciousness about the fact that the fear of public humiliation rules us like it. The 17th century. There's no judge sentencing people to a day in the stocks, but instead there's teenage YouTubers making cringe reaction videos. There's ex-boyfriends revenge posting their girlfriends' nudes. There's vigilant Twitter mobs harassing and shaming just about anyone for alleged breaches of wokeness. Public humiliation is a powerful force, and it's not a good force, but there are some rare exceptions. Back in the Gamergate era, Gamergate itself, of course, being a study in public humiliation, slut-shaming on a massive online scale, YouTube commentary was increasingly dominated by anti-feminism. As far as leftist content, there was the Young Turks, and there was a network of besieged feminist vloggers who were constantly mobbed and harassed. What I see as one of the turning points in shifting the atmosphere from the pro-Gamergate days to the left-tube world of today was a handful of videos uploaded by then obscure YouTuber Harry Brewis, in which he mocked a misogynist pseudo-intellectual called Davis Arini. Come on, Davis, we have to. No, stop lecturing me about ethics. We have to get out of here, and can you please stop trying to start a forest fire? In his YouTube videos, Davis would pontificate about the wickedness of women while posing in front of a toy skull and taking microscopic sips from a glass of whiskey. Men of the West, women in our culture have become the most decadent sluts since the fall of Rome. And so in discussing sluts versus whores, I would start with the premise that all women are whores. Harry's videos ridiculing Davis attracted a lot of views and a fairly positive response, even from a mostly male gamer audience who were overwhelmingly anti-feminist at the time. Why did these videos work with this audience where so many others didn't? Well, I think it's because Harry didn't moralistically call out Davis for being problematic or misogynistic. Instead, he simply drew attention to the fact that Davis is a cringe-worthy buffoon. And Davis was a perfect target because he truly is cringe in the traditional sense. He had no self-awareness about the fact that pretty much everyone saw through his absurd posturing as a badass tough guy by day, profoundly dark philosopher by night. We exist in a world with feminized legislation. I've spoken to men and boys who've told me that Harry's videos inspired the beginning of a feminist awakening in them, not just because they cringed at Davis Arini, but also because they recognized a little bit of Davis in themselves, and they cringed at that too. Recognizing part of yourself in a cringe-worthy person induces self-cringe, which can motivate you to change your behavior, your beliefs, or even your own self-concept. And it helps that Davis is a perfect instance of a recognizable stock character on the internet, namely the fedora tipper. Basically, a man who poses as a gallant crusader for traditional masculinity, but who's basically just a pasty nerd who can't relate to women. Davis was such an extreme version of this, and he delivered unintentionally hilarious moments so frequently that I would classify him as what the internet calls a lolcow. Lolcow is old fortune lingo. It means a person whose unintentionally eccentric or foolish behavior can be milked for lols. Milking in this context can mean simply watching a lolcow's behavior and laughing at them, or it can mean making reaction videos where you make fun of them, or it can mean actively trolling and provoking them to get a response that you find entertaining. I did describe Harry's videos about Davis, or me old videos about the Golden One, as lolcow milking content with a political angle. It was essentially an argument from ridicule, an argument from cringe, with the aim of convincing people, don't embarrass yourself like these ding-dongs, but also, and I'll just speak for myself here, I am, at the end of the day, an entertainer, and I wanted people to laugh. There does need to be a political agenda behind milking lolcos. In fact, usually, there isn't. The purest example of a lolcow I can think of is actually someone from way before the internet, namely Florence Foster Jenkins. Jenkins, or Lady Florence, as she liked to be called, was an American soprano who attracted a cult following in New York City during the 1920s. 30s, and 40s, due to her being such a terrible singer that people went to her concerts essentially for the lols. She was described as the world's worst opera singer. No one, before or since, has succeeded in liberating themselves quite so completely from the shackles of musical notation. Behold this fucking camp queen. Oh, we have no choice but to stand. Here's a short clip of one of the few recordings she made. Ah, 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 ah. Cringe. She was essentially the Tommy Wiseau, the William Hung of her age. Apparently she was oblivious to her own incompetence until 1944, when she was 76 years old and she booked Carnegie Hall for a concert, to which newspaper critics showed up. The next morning, the New York Sun reported much of her singing was hopelessly lacking in a semblance of pitch, but the further a note was from its proper elevation, the more the audience laughed and applauded. And 5 days later she had a heart attack and died. I find something very touching about this story. I mean, I'd probably be laughing as much as anyone if I were at Carnegie Hall that night, but I feel so much compassionate cringe for Lady Florence. It kind of makes you appreciate the kind cruelty of Simon Cowell. At least he tries to stop these people before things get out of hand. I think it's normal to have mixed feelings about a lolcow. Like, yes, this is hilarious, but on the other hand, doth not a lolcow bleed? On some level we know it's wrong to entertain ourselves this way, but on the other hand, other people's pain is incredibly entertaining. There's a good book about this called The Joy of Pain, Schadenfreude and the Dark Side of Human Nature by Richard Smith. Schadenfreude, that is the you the by you the root should do so you Empire I thought about Schadenfreude is of course the pleasure we take in other people's misery, and Smith argues that we experience it because psychologically we gain something when other people lose. We are constantly evaluating our own worth by comparing ourselves to other people. So we get a reassuring self-esteem boost, a pleasant feeling of superiority from comparing ourselves to people beneath us, especially if we are kind of insecure to begin with. Maybe I'm not perfect, but at least I'm not this lolka. And we also get a boost when people who are socially above us, whom we envy, get brought down a peg. James Charles, cancelled Party Lolo. I think Schadenfreude basically accounts for just a huge percentage of the things that happen on YouTube become. Smith uses the word humilitainment for this type of media, like reality shows designed to produce spectacular moments of embarrassment. And but the view for YouTube is basically a big reality feast show or some kind of carnival sideshow. Take a look around you. We have Eugenia Cooney, a YouTuber who, at the time of making this video, remains apparently in total denial about her eating disorder and continues to make videos modeling skimpy clothes for millions of gawkers. We have Wings of Redemption, a bad-tempered gamer who for a long time essentially confined by poverty, obesity, and depression to streaming video games all day to an audience of trolls that enjoyed tormenting him. We have Anision, a habitual alleged abuser of women and teenage girls, who earlier this year essentially performed his own mental breakdown on YouTube after Patreon banned him for doxing an accuser. I love Kombucha. Woo, 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 woo. Whose idea was it to give hundreds of pathological narcissists access to video equipment? What kind of sick social experiment are we living in? And the viewers are no better than the performers. Every one of you bloodthirsty voyeurs makes me sick. Oh, you people love nothing more than to watch one of us poor, helpless egomaniacs completely lose our minds live on camera. Is this what you want? This what you want? Is this what you want? A total meltdown? You know, as a creator, you have to be aware that you are a circus performer, and the crowd may in fact be more entertained if you fall from the trapeze and get eaten by the tigers. Online media today is full of Lady Florences, anti-celebrities with anti-fans. To be clear, I don't think they're anything inherently wrong with indulging now and then in a little bit of light contempt. Cringing at Davis or Rinnie or bad American Idol auditions seems pretty harmless, but it can be taken too far, and there's no better case study of taking it too far than the cult following of one Kristen Weston Chandler. If you don't know what's coming, you might wanna strap in gorge, because this is coconuts. It's bananas. It's a full fruit salad. God, how do I even begin to explain this? Well, Kristen Weston Chandler, more commonly known on the internet as Chris Chan, is the victim of what is quite possibly the longest-running and most obsessive internet trolling saga of all time. She's the lolcow. Lolcone. Hello, everybody. This is Kristen Chandler coming to you live from home once again. Chandler is an autistic trans woman. And yes, I will be calling her by she or her pronouns, which I pause to explain because I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually take her transition seriously. Most people seem to regard it as simply another absurd symptom of her hilarious mental condition. In fact, a bunch of trans people will probably get real salty with me for making trans people look bad by including Chris Chan in our very prestigious and exclusive club. Oh, please. Transsexualism is a deviant sexual identity, sweetie. This is not the Princeton Alumni Yacht Society. God, how did trannies get so snobbish? Look, is Chris Chan really trans? I don't know, and I don't care. If Chris Chan wants to be a woman, I for one support her journey. But it doesn't matter. The relevant thing about Chris Chan is not Chris Chan. It's the fact that for the last 13 years, nearly every aspect of her life has been obsessively archived online by thousands of voyeurs, known as Christorians. Chancellor first acquired this anti-fandom several internet centuries ago, back in 2007, when Fortune took notice of her comic book series Sonichu, a childishly drawn hybrid of Sonic and Pikachu. The comic is set in Quickville, Coco being Chris Chan's initials. The protagonist is a self-insert who references Chandler's real-life, quote, love quest to find a, quote, boyfriend-free girl, which apparently involved posting bizarre attraction signs around her community college. For this story to make sense, you have to keep in mind that Chandler identified and presented as male until 2015. So these trolls saw her as like the ultimate autistic incel man-child. Just to give you a feel for this person, here's Kristen in 2018, holding up the iconic pre-transition portrait. Note the Sonichu medallions. Here's the bedroom she lived in, and here she is in recent years, giving us a full Bronican eleganza. Pegasister snapped. Basically, she's the entire Cringetopia subreddit condensed into a single person. So Fortune zeroed right in on this shit. Because of course they did, and they began tormenting her by creating pornographic parodies of Sonichu, posting candid photos of her, etc. Chandler reacted to the trolls, which of course encouraged them more, and the harassment escalated and escalated. They hacked her accounts or tricked her into giving out passwords. They posted all her emails online. They showed up in person and photographed her house. They called her parents, posing as friends, psychiatrists, journalists, employers, in order to extract as much information about her as possible. And of course, they contacted Chandler herself, which was very rewarding for trolls because she has no filter and was very naive and trusting. So she was very willing to divulge, or easily manipulated into divulging, mortifying information about herself. Sexual, psychological, scatological. There's not really any limits or boundaries to this. For all the information they gathered, the trolls created a wiki called the Quickie, devoted to the obsessive compiling of all Chris Chan data. It includes a detailed diagram of her bedroom entire articles about all members of her immediate and extended family, pages of psychiatric records. She was tricked into sending them, and that's only the beginning. In their more grandiose moods, the Christorians have speculated that Chris Chan is the most documented life in all human history, comparing their social experitainment to the Truman Show. It's a level of obsession that surpasses the wildest excesses of stan culture. It's a gaze into the abyss that does not blink. Some trolls have also sent taunting letters in packages, or on one occasion, sex workers, to the Chandler household. 2 female trolls actually went on real-life dates with Chris Chan, of course, secretly wearing wires to record their conversations. They're secretly Others pretended to be her internet girlfriends so they could solicit and post nudes and masturbation videos. These things must be archived, don't you understand? Chris Chan must be documented. The absolute low point came when some trolls encouraged a 13-year-old boy to pose as a 19-year-old girl and have phone sex with Chris Chan and record it. In other words, they groomed a child to deceive an autistic person into performing sex acts for their entertainment. Now, to contemporary Christorians, this sort of sadistic interference in Christian's life is frowned upon. Not so much because it's immoral, so much as because it's considered a bit tacky, a bit attention-seeking. No, to the sophisticated Christorian, the real pleasure in all this is supposed to lie quietly spectating, savoring the fine notes of Cringe. Now, I take it I don't even need to comment on the morality of all this. The real question to me is why. Why do thousands of people have a morbid obsession with Kristen Chandler? And yes, it is an obsession. Just to give you a sense of a single individual's personal investment in this, the YouTuber Gino Samuel, one of very few Christorians with the audacity to show his face, has been working for more than 2 years to produce an eventual 100-episode documentary series about the life of Chris Chan. Gino has completed 36 episodes so far, and each episode is around 40 minutes long, meaning he's already produced around 24 hours of video about the life of what is essentially a random stranger. I think this phenomenon deserves its own name. I'll call it morbid cringe, defined as an obsessive and addictive contemptuous fascination with a particular person or group. Why does morbid cringe happen? Well, Ivy spent some time poring over Christorians' conversations with each other, and Ivy even interrogated a couple of them, and this is what we found. The first thing they'll tell you is that they just think it's funny and entertaining, that Christine's a strange life and mine simply appeals to their morbid curiosity. And I'm sure that's true. But a lot of things are funny and entertaining and morbidly interesting. They're funny and entertaining. They're surfing time they tear fun Why fixate on this particular person? Well, for a lot of them, it's a reassurance that there's someone out there worse than them. Maybe they nerdy loners with no social skills, but at least this defenseless punching bag called Chris Chan is here for them to assert their superiority over. It's pretty much common knowledge, and a frequent justification given for trolling Chris Chan is that she's giving autistics a bad name. In recent years, there's also been a small contingent of transgender trolls who are likewise prone to say, "He's not a real transgender like me and he's making us all look bad." Oh yeah, because people who troll Chris Chan, you guys look amazing. It's common for trolls to offer rationalizations like this about why trolling Chandler is justified, righteous even, because at the end of the day, trolls are people too. And a lot of them actually do have a guilty conscience about this, which they suppress by insisting that Chris Chan is a horrible person who deserves to be tormented. But trolls who protest too much about the evils of Chris Chan, and therefore reveal the excess of their emotional investment in this, are known in the community as a logs. A log is the name of a troll who attracted the ire of other trolls by ranting about Chris Chan's crimes, comparing her to Hitler, and generally betraying a pathological hate obsession. And who generally tell you fire 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 you travel Charlie, you and I try Among the trolls, this kind of behavior is considered an embarrassment to all of them because they want to feel like they re just cruelly and casually toying with this person. You know, just for laughs. Not a big deal. This is all perfectly healthy and normal and fine. It's fine. But Allah gave the lead to that illusion because it was obvious that his Christian obsession wasn't healthy or normal or fine. So the other trolls turned on Allah, and they made him into Christian 2.0, and they uncovered his autism, and his furry porn collection, and his cringy, erotic fan fiction. So why would someone as similar to Christian as Allah obsessively hate on her? Well, there's two explanations. One is troll shielding. That is, Allah may have performatively despised Christian and spearheaded the trolling efforts in order to protect himself from being targeted by trolls. The idea is that you can protect yourself from the mob by waving your pitchfork the hardest. Obviously, this did not work. The other explanation is that Allah saw himself reflected in Christian and sort of projected his own shame and self-contempt onto her. Allah hated Christian because he saw part of himself in her, and the other trolls hated Allah because they saw part of themselves in him. To quote Margaret Pless, who covered this story for New York Magazine a few years ago, I think it might be Allah all the way down. People form morbid cringe obsessions with Christian because to them she's a symbol of something they hate about themselves, something they re-ashamed of. Maybe it's being on the autism spectrum or being a socially awkward recluse. Maybe it's being unemployed and living with their parents, or an adulthood fixation on children's cartoons, or embarrassing sexual proclivities, or all of the above. This is how scapegoating works, right? You repress your uncomfortable feelings of shame and insecurity and self-loathing, and you displace them onto someone else, usually someone you can feel superior to. Then you blame and persecute the scapegoat, transforming your painful shame and self-loathing into pleasant, judgmental self-righteousness. It's pretty safe to assume that a large percentage of Christorians and trolls are some kind of social outcasts, much like Christian. So bonding together over their shared contempt for Christian is a way of processing the shame and anxiety of social rejection and exclusion. And I think for a lot of people, even normal people who aren't part of a bizarre internet stalker community, contemptuous cringing helps us cope with our own shame and insecurity. Anyway, it's time to stop this tedious empathizing with other people and find a way to make this all about me. Oh mio mio. Would you like to meet me quarantine boyfriend? Would you like to meet me boyfriend's boyfriend? That's right. Honey, I'm giving you Fujoshi realness. Naya. He's gonna stay right here as a grim reminder of the things that you have seen. Actually, I identify as a trap. It's a very that. I guess it's not really cringe if I'm trying to be cringe. Cringe is failed seriousness. In me last video, I talked about how ashamed I am of being a transgender lesbian. Cringe. Shame. At the end of that video, I talk about how I sense that me shame is related to the contemptuous cringy ye feel for a lot of other trans lesbians, particularly those of the heck and stripy sockniania catgirl variety. But I confess to periodically sinking into these morbid, Guilty binges of cringing at embarrassing trans lesbians. I want to return to that thought and kind of psychoanalyze myself as a kind of first-person case study of a morbid cringe obsession. So, capital trans girls air, okay, I can't to believe I'm about to explain this. They read trans women, usually attracted to women, who express their identity online through cloying, neatness, otaku memory. And me conscious reason for cringing at them is that I see these Japanese cartoon catgirls as a kind of visual baby talk, an infantilized and unrealistic representation of femininity and womanhood that's designed to titillate nerdy boys. So when trans women identify with it, I cringe. Like, no, you can't become an anime girl. Lily, fuck your dreams. Now look, I don't want to get sidetracked with a discussion of whether me opinions about catgirls are fair or correct. So don't listen to what I'm saying about catgirls. Listen to what I am feeling about catgirls. Listen to the contempt beneath me words. Because even if everything I'm saying is true, catgirls are being cringe online is a situation so inconsequential that any amount of emotional energy spent on it is too much. So why do I have this cringe fixation? Well, according to the log theory of morbid cringing, we form obsessive and addictive contempt for people who have traits in common with us. People who make us uncomfortable because we see something of ourselves in them. So do I have traits in common with the catgirls? Well, we read both trans women. We read both attracted to women. I do like anime, but I don't like the anime they like. Okay. I like good anime that has mature, three-dimensional female characters. Look, I'm a real transgender. Okay. I'm not like you. It's also not lost on me that this is like the seventh time on this channel I've addressed as a catgirl to make fun of them. I have posted cringe. You should all be laughing at me right now. Nyan, 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 Nyan. So I do think there's some truth to the idea that I'm logging these catgirls. I also think there's a group representation aspect to this. Like, I'm afraid that other people will cringe at a group that includes men trans lesbians because of how these catgirls are acting. So let's make another distinction between in-group cringe and out-group cringe. In-group cringe is when you cringe at someone who belongs to the same group identity as you. For example, your family, your romantic partnership, your ethnicity, or your country, particularly if they re-embarrassing themselves in front of outsiders to the group. Think about how embarrassed a teenager gets if her mom does something cringy in front of her friends. Or think about how embarrassed liberal Americans get when we talk to foreigners about Donald Trump being our president. Or think about these phrases. She makes me embarrassed to be a YouTuber. They remaking trans people look bad. He's giving autistics a bad name. When we cringe at someone who belongs to our identity group, we don't just feel vicarious embarrassment. We feel embarrassment because their disgraceful behavior makes us look bad too. So in-group cringe is actually a kind of self-cringe because you're re-cringing at your membership in an embarrassing group. Nothing has ever triggered this kind of in-group embarrassment more for me than a cringe video that went viral last year in which a masculine trans woman throws a tantrum over being misgendered in a GameStop. You gonna give me fucking money back. Excuse me, sir, there's a young man in here. Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am. This video is excruciating for me to watch. Motherfucker, take it outside. If you wanna call me sir again, I will show you a fucking sir. Motherfucker. The paradoxical absurdity of trying to brutishly intimidate people into seeing you as a woman. Now Twitter's gonna come for me over this and say Natalie hates trans women who don't pass. But passing is really not what this is about. It's aggressive, intimidating, hyper-masculine behavior from a trans woman accompanied by apparently total delusion about how she's presenting. Well, I'm gonna ask you for the fifth time to stop calling me a man because quite clearly I am not. It's really not that clear, Gorge. And that's what makes this video classic cringe, right? The incongruity between her thinking that she's serving woman while bellowing like a drill sergeant. By the way, what I'm doing right now, this is cringe reaction content. I don't really do that on this channel, but I'm dipping me toe in just to see how it feels. And it feels good, like intoxicatingly good. I can see how you could get addicted to this. I am imagining myself right now surrounded by cis people, and I am leading the righteous mob as we point and laugh at some delusional manly dump truck. I am a real transgender, a true transgender, a good transgender. Father finally approves of me. This would be the unconscious archetypal father. Jot that down in me progress notes, please, doctor. Okay, so why does this feel so good? Well, let me talk you through me feelings. When I watched that GameStop video, for the first few seconds, I do feel vicarious embarrassment for her. I can even relate, because in the first couple months of me transition, there was an occasion where I was in a lengthy customer service interaction where the guy at the desk was calling me sir the entire time. And there's something very humiliating about trying to present female, like wearing a dress and makeup, and yet being called sir. It's a quintessential mismatch between self-concept and the way other people are seeing you. And the memory of it is painful to me, but what I cling to is that while I may have looked like a man, at least I didn't act like a man. I didn't threaten to take anyone outside and show them a sir. In fact, I was too ashamed even to correct the guy. So as the GameStop video progresses, my sympathy runs out fast. And instead of compassionate cringe, I feel group embarrassment for trans women, including myself. And I feel contempt toward this individual for making us all look bad. I also feel a kind of morbid fascination rooted in fear. What if I'm as delusional as that trans woman? I don't look and sound like that, do I? I feel like I have to do a sanity check. I start scrutinizing myself in the mirror, listening to recordings of me voice just to make sure. And that fear motivates me to distance myself from that person in the video. I don't feel compassion for her, because that would mean putting myself in her size 16 shoes. And I don't want to do that, because I'm horrified and repulsed by the thought that I am like her in some way. So I want to push away. And contempt is a way of emotionally distancing myself. And if I express that contempt by publicly shaming and condemning her, then I am also socially distancing myself. Accidental covered jokes. Whoops. Geez, it's contagious. I think many people who are stigmatized or who have been humiliated long for the experience of being a normal, surrounded by fellow normals, judging and humiliating a freak. And if you take a look around trans YouTube, a lot of the biggest creators in the platform have channels basically devoted to exactly this type of cringe reaction humilitainment. The YouTuber Calvin Gura is a trans gay who's best known for what are essentially cringe reaction videos, mostly aimed at people he deems trans trenders. That is, people who claim to be trans, but who aren't real transgenders like Calvin. He's especially bothered by girly, FAB, trans and non-binary teenagers, or by anyone who blurs the line between lesbian and trans masculine identities. Sometimes he'll do a long-form reaction to a specific person who grinds his gears. So this person is an asexual, non-binary, transgender lesbian who uses he, they, it, thons pronouns. According to me calculations, you are a trans-trender. And other times he all basically just laugh at cringy trans TikTok teens. No, no, I'm turning off the video. I can't watch this. He has a couple justifications for making these videos. One is that he's actually helping the people he's cringing at, because if a trender transitions, then they all get dysphoria and have to detransition. But I have to wonder, does humiliating or laughing at people really help them figure out whether they retrans or not? His other justification is that trans trenders are giving real trans people a bad name. They the reason people are transphobic. This is why they hate us. It's because of the trenders. Whoa, I love that idea of a true scum furry. Isn't that just? Isn't that just wonderful? A true scum furry. But it's not, though. I mean, transphobia existed long before there were people you could plausibly describe as trans-trenders. So trans-trenders aren't the reason society hates trans people, Calvin. They the reason you hate trans people, right? Or at least the trans community. And I feel like what you redoing is you projecting that feeling onto society at large, and you saying, oh, this is the reason people are transphobic. And to be fair, I get that it's not just a projection. Like back in 2016, the Cringe era, it was cis people mocking trans people with all these tropes. Attack helicopter, 2 genders, 76 genders, special snowflakes. But now, they reused by trans people trying to distance themselves, trying to ghettoize the most laughed at people in the community under the label of trans trenders. And Calvin, there may be some truth to what you saying about there being confused teenagers who think they retrans when they not. I mean, I would to know. I'm a near-dead woman in the twilight of my life, and I don't hang out with teenagers. But even if it is true, Calvin, your fixation on it seems disproportionate to me. Like, you return to this topic to cringe again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. It's like you repicking at a wound. It feels to me like a morbid cringe obsession. And Aguis, I think I recognize part of myself in you. This could be me projecting, of course. But I wonder if the way you feel about girly, sparkle gender affabs is similar to the way I feel about otaku, transbian cat girls. And it might be worth considering that I don't cringe at the sparkle genders the way you do. I mean, I'm with you on wondering what a he they zir gender flux lesbian de my boy is. But unlike you, Calvin, I just don't have a morbid cringe obsession with feminine affeb trans people. They can identify as however many genders they want for all I care. I may not always understand it, but I support their journey. I guess it doesn't bother me, because I'm not worried that anyone will judge me because of how they behave. I don't feel in group cringe. Now it's a different story. If I am reading a general lesbian subreddit and I see a comment like, pre-transition trans lesbian here. I wish I had titties. Girl, dick, Nia. Get the fuck out of here, Billy. You giving real trans lesbians a bad name. This is why they hate us. See, now I have strong feelings. Now I'm in group cringing. And intellectually, I don't think me feelings are correct to some extent. Like, I don't think a general lesbian community is the appropriate form for a trans woman who's effectively still living as a man to take the mick and whine about wanting titties or rhapsodize about girl dick. But I am also aware that I feel this strongly about this because of my own dysphoria and my own shame. And honestly, my own self-loathing. Like, I can't even talk, to cis woman on dating apps because I feel like a fake woman imposing myself on real women. That's where my head is at. So where does this pre-transition trans lesbian get the audacity? You know, it makes me feel in group cringe about an identity, trans lesbianism, which for me is already a pain point of insecurity and embarrassment and shame. So Calvin, maybe, and again, I could just be projecting, but maybe that's kind of like how you feel about these trenders. When you make these videos condemning them as not really trans, aren't you essentially exiling them from the in-group so you no longer feel the pain of in-group cringe? Or perhaps, Calvin Garra, what you really trying to destroy is the trender within. Whoa, the trender you do you well, and again, I could be full of shit here. At the end of the day, this is psychoanalysis of a YouTuber I haven't met. So feel free to tell me if I full of it still. I invite you to consider whether producing trender humilitainment is actually helping anything, or whether it's really just an addictive way to scratch some kind of emotional itch. All right, I've said my piece about Calvin. Who's next? Oh, how about Vanessa? We meet again. Gorge. And once again, I'm wearing some kind of embarrassing and I'm hairpiece. Vanessa is a trans woman who is the second most popular political trans YouTuber. At least that's what I wrote in the script when I had more subscribers than her and was fully prepared to be a cunt about it. But since then, she has in fact surpassed me once again. Good for her. Vanessa started out as basically a cringe reaction channel back when still cringe was fashionable. She cringed at a wide variety of shows. The most consistent theme was trans trenders and crazy activists era giving real trans people a bad name. They remaking us look bad. This is why people hate us. So what we can now recognize as a standard in-group cringe fixation. But Vanessa accused in particular on a strident, type trans woman called Riley Dennis. And Vanessa made several reaction videos to her where she made a point of misgendering Riley and dismissing her as a fake transgender who had transitioned and clearly had no intention to. You know, if you went on estrogen, your sex drive wouldn't be so high, and you'd be guilt-tripping people into having sex with you. Just saying. Then, Riley made a video revealing that she'd been on hormonal therapy for a year and was about to undergo facial feminization surgery. This prompted Vanessa to make an apology video where she not only apologized to Riley and acknowledged her transition, but she actually went beyond the script of a generic whoopsie-doopsie YouTube video and opened up about having experienced herself the cruelty she directed at Riley. And I'm someone who's had me transition picked apart online. There have been Reddit threads and Fortune threads with hundreds of comments on it of people trying to prove that I'm not trans because I haven't done this or that or, you know, digging up my old pictures. And so the thought that this entire time I've done that exact same thing to someone else and pushed that off on someone else fucks with me and I'm fucking sorry. Vanessa actually managed, for one fleeting moment, to make a connection between her own past hurt and trauma and the pain she'd inflicted on another person, which is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime event on a website where the performers are remorseless psychopaths who wouldn't muddy their shoes to save a drowning child, and the viewers are cold-blooded sadists who consume human misery like a glutton gorging himself at a particularly sumptuous buffet. You know, this whole thing has really taught me a lesson that I should really try to stick to ideas, opinions, policy. However, This lesson would not last. Vanessa kept doing still cringe content well past the point it had become pass, making a video with Big Red in the thumbnail as recently as 2019. I admit I thought she was fading into irrelevance, but once again I underestimated Vanessa. In July 2019, her channel rocketed to a new level of success when she released a video titled Exposing Jessica Yaniv, Trans Predator. In this video, Vanessa sounds the alarm about a trans woman, or rather she believes a man posing as a trans woman called Jessica Yaniv. Who the fuck is Jessica Yaniv? Well, as far as I can tell, everything Vanessa says about Yaniv is true. Yaniv attempted to use a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal to close down several beauty salons that had refused to wax her hairy balls after she approached them about it in an awkward and creepy way. She has a long history of sending extremely inappropriate messages to underage girls, and she attempted to host a topless pool party for unchaperoned children. Basically, Yaniv is someone who appropriates the language of transgender acceptance and equality to cloak predatory behavior toward minors. And my read on Yaniv, by the way, is not that she's a cunning manipulator, but that this is someone who is mentally not playing with a full deck. After the success of her initial video, Vanessa made a few more videos about Yaniv rebranding herself as a kind of transsexual Chris Hansen, exposing transgender predators wherever she could find them. And at first, I was honestly kind of loving this for Vanessa. At least now she's finally picking on someone who deserves it. But the more I think about it, the more hesitations I have. One is that Vanessa framed the Yaniv story and the lack of attention given to it by other trans public figures as an indictment of trans activists, who Vanessa thinks should spend more time sounding the alarm about transgender predators. And I'm willing to admit, there's probably a valid point in there somewhere. Like, some trans people really are so paranoid about transphobes framing all of us as dangerous perverts that they basically look the other way and refuse to acknowledge the small but real subset of trans people who are, in fact, dangerous perverts. But Blair, you talk about the Yaniv situation like it's urgent breaking news, like Yaniv should rightfully be a household name, but for the stubborn silence of trans activists. But why? Why should everyone be focused on Jessica Yaniv? There's more than 100,000 sexual assaults reported to American law enforcement every year. The literal president of America is a bit of a sexual predator himself. Why fixate on this one particular Canadian creep? I guess you could argue that since Yaniv is a trans-identified predator, a tip. We as real trans people have a responsibility to be the ones who lead the charge to stop her. Or at least it would be good optics for us to do that. And again, I think there's maybe some truth to that. Like, initially, the looked website Pink News straightforwardly reported Yaniv's claims of discrimination, which is pretty embarrassing and not great optics. But I don't think that constantly broadcasting updates about the transgender threat is really the best optics for it either. Why did Vanessa make this video in the first place? Is it simply because she cares deeply about the well-being of children and she thought making a video exposing Jessica Yaniv is the best way to protect them? I mean, I'm sure she cares a little bit about the children, but it's still a YouTube video. And you have to ask, is the primary intention here really to stop a predator? Or is it to manufacture a sleazy entertainment spectacle? Shortly after her first Yaniv video was published, Vanessa hosted a live stream on her channel titled Heated Debate with Jessica Yaniv, Trans Predator. This got 2 million views. Is this what you do with someone you've just accused of pedophilia? You host a live event debating the pedophile on your YouTube channel. What's to debate? I don't need to be scared in me own house that I'm gonna get fucking attacked and I'm gonna have to pay money, which is illegal in Canada. Just saying, but you think that was, like, cute. Was that a moment for you? Then, of course, you sell t-shirts featuring the meme that resulted from your YouTube pedophile debate. I mean, that makes sense. If you gonna catch a predator, you gotta sell pedophile debate merch. And of course, you gotta follow the pedophile's makeup tutorial, for the children. Now, I hate to be overly critical, but when I look at this, I don't see a high-minded activist working to protect children and trans people's image. I see a tabloid entertainer who's discovered a way to monetize milking lols from a mentally defective pervert. And I have to say, Blair, as a connoisseur of trash myself, I'm very entertained by all of this. Following a sexual predator's makeup tutorial. That's genius. I wish I'd thought of that. But just be honest. This isn't activism. This isn't justice. It's a lolcow cult. It's like one of Maurice's transsexuals took over the show, and I love that for her. I love that for her. But Blair, I can't help but notice you still hitting all the same beats your videos have always hit. Attention, everyone. There is a bad transgender in our midst. The bad transgender is not a real transgender like him. It's so very important that we all gather around to condemn this bad transgender who is not a real transgender. And Blair, I'll give you this. You are getting better at choosing your targets. The transvestite monster is a stock character in our culture, and Jessica Yaniv is good casting for the part. She saw transphobe's bougie man come to life, and I certainly am not shedding any tears for her. But you all have to excuse me if I don't take this seriously, as anything more than a smarter version of the same in-group cringe humiliatement you've always made. And, by the way, you may want to check in on your understudy, Rose of Dawn. Rose of Dawn is another conservative trans woman YouTuber who produces a series called Trans Stupid. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Trans Stupid, the show where I take a look at the wonderful world of Vcodec news because stupidity is intersectional. Transgender. More like trans retarded. More like trans gay. Trans gay, I love that. I just realized I'm literally trans gay. Rose's channel is allegedly about the excesses of trans ideology and activism, which in theory I do think is a perspective worth including in the conversation. But in practice, well, let's just say, Rose has produced a 30-minute documentary about why Chris Chen is not a real transgender. There is a bad transgender in our midst. The bad transgender is not a real transgender like me. I'm getting pretty tired of this. And here's her transition advice to trans women just beginning their journey. You probably have this image in your head that you're going to be this really cute-looking trans woman. Like, effectively, you're going to be this seal. Like, look at this seal. Isn't this seal adorable? Look, you're so cute. But the truth is, you're probably not looking like this seal right now, are you? You're probably more like this big bull seal barging your way into women's bathrooms saying, "This is a woman's body." Now, you might never reach the cute seal phase. In fact, very few of us turn out to look like Blair White. Rose, no, do not simp for Vanessa. It only encourages her. She's also made no less than 20 videos about Jessica Yaniv, which seems like kind of a lot. Gorge. Would I be wrong to say I'm getting a little bit of a morbid cringe addiction vibe? In these videos, Rose chronicles Yaniv's numerous crimes and wrongdoings, but she also cannot resist making it very clear how disgusted she is with Yaniv's appearance. The irony being that this kind of tweet came from someone who you can smell just by looking at a picture of them. I bring this up again, not because I have any interest at all in white knighting for Yaniv. I do not support her journey. As far as I'm concerned, she can eat shit, and maybe she does. I wouldn't be surprised. No, my point is that part of the catharsis that Rose and Vanessa seem to derive from making this kind of content comes from contrasting themselves as good, presentable, real trans people with the hideousness of the wretched fake trans dump truck. A classic Vanessa thumbnail is divided into two halves. On one half, Vanessa, looking fish, looking cunt, always with her lip gloss in the live streams. And in the other half of the thumbnail, for contrast, the tragic dump truck in a maladjusted wig. And I'm allowed to say dump truck because before I transitioned, I was one of Vanessa's dump trucks. I was one of hashtag her dump trucks. Look, I happen to possess a little thing you probably haven't heard of it called inner beauty. That's right, sweetie, my pancreas, unclockable. Well, meanwhile, Rose, who prefers to represent herself with this cartoon, okay, straight up refers to Yaniv as the tubby troon and the Titanic tranner of Canada. A particular Titanic tranner of Canada. The Titanic tranner of Canada. Tranner and troon being pejoratives for transgender that I associate with fortune, where I'm guessing Rose has spent a lot of time. As for the emphatic revulsion toward Yaniv's fatness, well, I'm guessing that must be another important part of stopping a predator, right? It seems almost to be to condemn people for how raw they look when I think that tough love in a way is needed because I look at what I looked like when I first transitioned in Jesus Christ. I wish me friends had said something. Like, I looked bad. Like, I was overweight. I had a poor taste in clothes. Like, I was never wearing stupid dresses or anything. It was mostly t-shirts and jeans. You probably more like this big bull seen barging your way into women's bathrooms saying, "This is a woman's body." Now, you might never reach me. You'd see the face. In fact, very few of us turn out to look like black whites. And I want to make it very clear that when I am talking about transition, I don't mean that you Rose are okay. No, you not okay. None of us are okay. No trans woman remotely in the public eye is in any way okay. And look, I don't want to take the psychoanalysis too far because I don't know from watching YouTube videos what's going on in someone's head, but I can try to make intelligent inferences. And I think it's pretty revealing that this is how Rose introduces the topic of Jessica Yaniv. I think, well, one of the biggest characters in the whole fucking world at the moment, which is Jessica Yaniv. Rose Gorge, Jessica Yaniv is not one of the biggest characters in the whole world at any moment. This is not a world historical figure. At the end of the day, this is a more or less random civilian sex fiend off the streets of Vancouver. The only reason anyone has heard of her at all is that Vanessa decided to go full to catch a predator and turn this grimy reprobate into a minor anti-celebrity. She is not one of the most important characters in the world, but it sounds like what she is. Rose is one of the most important characters in your brain. This is distorted thinking. It's like a log comparing Chris Chan to Hitler. You so deep in the morbid cringe obsession that you lost perspective. And I'm sure you have what seemed to you like perfectly logical reasons why you devoting so much attention to this. And I know videos about Yaniv get a lot of views, so I am sure that's a factor too. But Rose, I also know a morbid cringe obsession when I see one. And I know that being a visible trans woman on the internet is more difficult than most people can imagine. And I know that pretty much every trans person is bullied or shamed or humiliated at some point in our lives. And I know how good it can feel to take all the horrible things transphobes and bullies and TERFs have said about us and repeat them verbatim about some big, fat, fake, dangerous, delusional, disgusting male fetishist. Oh, it feels good to be the TERF for once. It feels good to be the judge rather than the judged. Because when you point the finger at someone else, you are also pointing away from yourself. And it's not lost on me that in conservative circles, queer people are often treated like suspected sex criminals by default. So there's safety in being the one who spearheads the think of the children type moral crusade. And when you expose a trans predator, you get that feeling of safety plus the relief of having someone in particular to blame for the shame and stigma we all feel. Jessica Yaniv is the reason people hate us, but that's just not true. It's a simple answer to a complicated problem. It's scapegoating. When I look at the Yaniv obsession on trans YouTube, I see a community trying to cope with stigma and hoping that destroying a scapegoat will bring relief. It's basically a blood sacrifice. It's not rational. It feels good for a moment, but it's an addiction. It won't ever erase the stigma and the shame. And Yaniv is simply the latest and most deserving in a long line of bad transgenders who aren't real transgenders and are giving us a bad name and are the reason people hate us and must be condemned and destroyed. But when Yaniv is finally gone, when you get her sent to prison or whatever your goal is, you're just gonna find a new scapegoat to take her place. And the shame cycle continues. The humiliation and bullying we've experienced is internalized as shame. When we project that shame onto scapegoats and onto each other, it becomes cringing and contempt, and we voice that contempt by shaming other people, which starts a new cycle. So you can keep finding new scapegoats, new punching bags, new shame dumps, new locos, and you can end up like one of the people who's been archiving Chris Chan for 13 years, but that will never really heal this. God, how do I get out of this video? Oh, I'm trying to have a serious conversation dressed as some sort of cultural degenerate. Cringe. Shame. I'm ashamed. Don't look at me. You know, I love wearing florals in front of flowers. Thank you, yes. I suppose it is groundbreaking. All right, children. Let's review our notes on cringe. The word cringe really describes two different emotions, either embarrassment or contempt. You can feel either one for yourself or for someone else. When you embarrassed for someone else, we call that vicarious embarrassment. We call that for by and that can mean cringing with someone who is embarrassed themselves, which have been argued is excluded in the internet usage of the word cringe. Or it can mean embarrassment for someone who isn't embarrassed themselves, in which case we say we're cringing at them. Now, if someone who's part of your in-group is embarrassing themselves, and by proxy, embarrassing the in-group that includes you, you feel in-group cringe, which can involve both vicarious embarrassment and a kind of self-cringe. And on the contempt side, contempt for someone who shares traits in common with you, particularly if they are traits you have contempt for in yourself, can develop into morbid cringe, which is that obsession with a lolcow, that addiction to contemptuous gazing at a dark mirror in which you see reflected everything you hate about yourself or about your in-group. Now I want to end this video by reflecting on whether cringe is good or bad, healthy or harmful. And I do think that in some situations, Cringe is good. Embarrassment serves a social purpose. It helps us interact smoothly with each other by telling us what not to do. And empathizing with other people's embarrassing stories can be cathartic. It can make you feel closer to other people, more alike, less alone. I also think a moderate amount of self-cringe is very healthy. It shows you self-aware, and you care at least a little bit what other people think. You know, I've met people who never cringe at themselves, and let's just say they not me kind of people. They narcissists who think super highly of themselves, regardless of how they actually coming across. But I think partly out of fear of ending up like one of those people, I've overcompensated, and I cringe too much, both at myself and at other people. It's that kind of making me hate myself, and it's making me unfairly contemptuous towards others. And when I take a look around the internet, like AV done in this video, I find that I'm not alone in this situation, and it's not cute. So how do we cringe less? Well, the cliché solution is self-love, which our culture places a lot of value on. Self-love and self-esteem. You know, I don't care what haters and losers say. I'm a bad bitch. I look like a supermodel. I'm a genius. We're encouraged to hype ourselves up in this way, but it doesn't work because it's not realistic. You don't look like a supermodel, and you're not a genius. And when you realize that, you fall from one extreme to the other of what Chris Fleming calls the self-esteem tower of terror. You go from self-love to self-hate. But self-hate is also a distortion. Recently, I was listening to a David Foster Wallace interview. Yeah, I know. Cringe. And he attacked me mercilessly and unprovoked. There's a lot of narcissism and self-hatred. How dare you notice that? I'm in this photo, and I don't like it. But it's true. Time spent cringing at yourself is still time spent obsessing over yourself. And it's hard not to, because humans are animals, so our perspective is egocentric by nature. But we can still learn to appreciate that the world is bigger than us. I mean, I've heard rumors. In that book we started with, Cringeworthy, Melissa Dahl advocates not self-love or self-hate, but what she calls self-indifference. She says, self-indifference is the relief of realizing that you are simply not that big a deal. So yeah, I was pretty cringy in the past, and I am still pretty cringy now. But you know what? Everyone else is pretty cringy too. And the world's probably gonna burn down in 50 years anyway, so I don't know if I would call this good news, but if it's any consolation, nothing matters. 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 Oh.